We're starting a live broadcast, and you don't have permission to live stream. Okay, I want to welcome everyone to Bridges Live. We're starting a new program. So, and the new program is with Dr. O'Shane here, and we will be talking about these black human beings' trauma that's been haunting tons of people. And one of those things that we know is haunted is the idea of trauma, right? And so we're going to be taking some things, and that's why I think I called this show Free at Last. I think we need to really start unpacking this. I think so many times the shows I've had has talked about black human beings in trauma and human beings in trauma, just people in general in trauma. And yet it still seems to be such a struggle. Let's talk about Dr. O'Shea. First, introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are, where you're coming from, and what you do for a living. Because if people watch me, they know me. But let's talk about you.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me on your show. My name is Dr. O'Shane Gadsden. I'm an applied psychologist, a PhD in counseling psychologist, researcher, professor. My focus clinically and my research focus is on and has been on the understanding of the impact of gender socialization and trauma on African American men and their capacity around emotional intimacy. I also look at using non-traditional epistemology, spiritual epistemologies, and working with African American patients and populations. And so I teach at Norfolk State University. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology within their undergraduate and our PhD program, which we are part of the Virginia Consortium PhD Clinical Psychology program. And I'm also a training director at Region Psychological Consulting Services. It's a small clinic / private practice in Northeast DC, where I see patients myself, but also train and provide supervision for students.
You know, so when you talk about gender equality, explain what that is. A lot of people, because that is very specific when it comes to people who having these situations. So explain that little piece there.
Well, when I think about gender equality, I'm certainly not, my research and focus is not on equity and equality in sort of the political sense. But in some way, I am looking at it, and it is important from my perspective to look at how multiple systems of oppression do psychologically and emotionally impact and damage black folks in general, but specifically black men and boys, and how that oppression and discrimination and all of that trauma is involved in their normal developmental process, integrated into their normal developmental process, and how that impacts their sense of self and their identity, and how all of that internalization of trauma, whether it be oppression, whether it be trauma in the home, whether it be sexual trauma, etc., how that gets acted out in African American men's lives as a consequence of not understanding or just projecting or displacing it, because they are still unhealed and they're still carrying those wounds. So that's how I think about that topic in the context of my work.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and this is where when it comes down, and then we're gonna be talking here, Free at Last, breaking blacks' bondage of emotional trauma. So this is what we're going to be talking about for the next coming weeks on this show, Free at Last, right? And if you have any questions or any comments, you can do it on Facebook, you can do it on Instagram, you can do it on Twitter, you can do it on YouTube. You can actually call me if you want to come on the show. It's 301-789-3174. When we're talking about carrying things forward, one of those things that we and I talked about off air is that there's a brain component that people are just not understanding why they're still struggling with the same thing. Even when they say, I'm over it. I think especially when they say, you know, I'm past all that. It still comes up in their life. What have you found?
Yeah, I found that, and of course you're going to talk about, and I'm fascinated to hear how you understand this from a neurological perspective, but from an analytic perspective, we talk about transferences, and we talk about how these traumas are repressed or suppressed, and how they don't quite disappear. In other words, the psyche, the emotionality, the neurotransmitters, we go on, are severely impacted by these multiple types of trauma. And people are not, it's not in the sphere of consciousness. They're not aware of this total impact, but you can see it in multiple dimensions of people's lives and even in their body, the way that their body is acting or acting out. And so I think it's really important for us during our time together to really bring in a holistic understanding of neurological, psychological, emotional, and see how all of these things and things that we are as Black folks and as Black men have been carrying. And there's no one to give us language to it, no one to understand it deeply. And in fact, because of the multiple structures of oppression, no one is really concerned. And so no one takes the time because who cares?
Right. As long as you behave, we're good with you. and that seems to be the saddest issue is as long as you behave, you drive the speed limit, you pay your taxes, you should be fine.
Yes, absolutely.
And
anything else?
So I look at this and tell me I've actually gotten into the science of where Black people have been more diabetic, more sugar attracted to because of trauma that's in their bodies, because of what it does to the chemistry inside the body. It raises the glucose level. It helps destroy the liver, which helps clean the blood. And if your liver isn't good, there's all these other impactful things that happens in the body. So I actually believe, and my studies in science have shown, that because the brain is still producing all these extra hormones, adrenalines, that is secreting in the body, it's causing an influx, which causes sugar to be on the highs, more cancer problems. We know what cortisol does, right? We know what it does to muscles in the bones and tissue. There's other things that's going on in the body, and I still think it's not because people aren't living well or they're not happy. I still think there's some deep embedded trauma, whether it be molestation I talked about, whether it be the abuse of the father or the mother, not confronted. Whether you believe that that's just how you're supposed to have been raised, it is still traumatic, which still causes trauma. I think people separate the things between traumatic and trauma.
I think they do. And I mean, I was thinking about what you were talking about when I was completing my dissertation. I was looking at the studies on the impact of racism, of cortisol levels, hypertension, and on racism on people's body. And so we know that the body and the mind, we can't separate. It's a holistic package. And these things that are somatically showing up many times can be shifted if ecology is different or the structures are different. But because these things are not different, people internalize these traumas on multiple levels, and the body takes it in. The body tries to make sense of it. So I think it's really important, from my perspective, that we do have a holistic approach to this, where we have dietitians, neurologists, nutritionists, people that understand how the body works, that help us have these conversations about diet and how diet is impacted by trauma, and how we have intergenerationally just accepted that this is a part of our culture, this is a part of how we eat, this is a part of how we live, because this is survival way of being, and we have to shape that and have these hard discussions about a holistic healing that may feel uncomfortable when we hear about it, because it's new and we've been doing it like this for a long time. We have to shift, and create this level of dissonance so that we can get to another level of healing, individually within our community.
Do you think it's we say there's things that happen, there's things that will happen. Are we at this time where if it doesn't get understood now, I actually feel this is bridge, that if we don't understand this now, I think we're in for a downfall. I think there's no way to go except down to end up destroying it ourselves.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is what don't connect this holistically, that we're going to be, I like to call it in our language, still split off.
Yeah.
There's no true integration of self. Because one part may be functioning in some way that's normative, right? But there's so many other parts of us that are disassociated and split off that sooner or later the whole organ is going to be depleted and destroyed. So I think we have to, yes, talk about this in this way, because if we don't, sooner or later, we're going to be evaporated. We're not going to be able to function and do anything of real merit or real power.
And you know, one of the things that young athletes or people who are trying to be what you call economically free. Okay, I grant everyone economic wealth or however they see fit. With the studies that you and I both have done, this is the same reason why black athletes are broke X amount of years after they leave the league, is because they are still traumatized and sick. Because they are still, people say, well, they just didn't learn the lesson. They just didn't have a good accountant. No, that's not the issue. The issue of buying more than you need is a trauma effect of things that you did not have, and it keeps seeping into your judgment, which we know is a frontal lobe issue, which we know is a cognitive skill issue. So when we talk about young children developing cognitive behavior at the age of 5, when cognitive sets in, to the age of 8, is 80% of all the things you've ever learned in a cognitive way, and you are a poor black child. When you're 22 making $20 million, whatever number you want to put on that, you're still trying to heal that 6-7-year-old child mentally.
Yes, absolutely. We talk about that. I call it repetition compulsion.
Yeah.
The adult is attempting through his or her adult life, not just in relationships, but as it relates to our relationship with money and food and things, attempting to satisfy that anxiety, that overarching latent anxiety that has never gone away. It continues to build itself up because no one is really dealing with it, reconciling it, and healing it. And then we externalize it, as you talked about, through these compulsivities, like the incorrect use of money, let's say like that, or the incorrect use of food, or ways that are destructive to our body and to our mind. And so I think we really do have to talk about this, because we have been talking for many years in the black community about mobility, political and economic mobility. And a lot of that conversation, even from your paradigm, not that it's wrong, but that much of it is really probably fueled from this overarching collective anxiety and apathy and collective feeling of not worthiness, that we use money and policy to make us feel better. That is not to say that we don't deserve equity, equality, and fairness, but it's the meaning that we're making of it spiritually and psychologically that many of us are not even conscious of. We're trying to use it. We're medicating.
And I know I've had some pushback from a collective crowd of black people, but individually, when you tap into something that they can tap into, and here's what's the funny part: when we have our individual sessions, we get to ask you personalized questions, and we're like, that's attached to A, B, or C, and they're like, you gotta be kidding me, right? That's what I get. Really? I'm like, yeah. But when you talk to a crowd, it's so generalized because we have to, and they're like, no, that's not me. And it's like, we know it's you in there, and it's hard for your mind to attach to pain because of how we remember things from another context in our brain. Because when we remember something, the brain reconstructs, but the mind hides bad things. It's like the most overprotective mother you can have. It does not want you to feel the pain, but it's still going to produce the chemicals of pain without you recognizing the pain. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And what you're talking about is what we do in therapy. It's amazing. The language you're using is like, one of the things that I enjoy about narrative therapy is that. And a big part of it is helping people to restore, to really deeply look at the psychological, emotional content of their cognitive memories, and to then refocus. Because I don't have anything to add. I mean, you said it beautifully. And I think that the piece that I would add that's interesting is that when people are in larger settings like church or school and these things are being said, it's easier to ward it off. It's easier to say, well, that's him.
Yeah.
That's for her. That doesn't apply to me, right? And or if they're trying to, impression management, if they're trying to show face, right? It's easier to, but face to face, one on one, that is the process of therapy and healing that's very different. And I say this to my friends who are preachers and pastors. I say, I love what you do. We can talk about religion and we can get there. And I'm not even going to get into that. But there's something different about what I do and what you do.
Yes.
What you do is very corporate. It's needed.
Yes.
People are blessed.
Yes.
But people can misinterpret.
Yes.
And use what you're saying in ways that is not appropriate for them. Based on their trauma.
And the only reason, like you said, it's not that they're choosing. Listen to me, people. You got to listen to Dr. O'Shea and I. We're not telling you you're choosing to misinterpret. We're telling you that your trauma that's in your life is creating misinterpretations. Yes. That's a difference. Now, you may not recognize the misinterpretation because you're saying, I'm a very smart person, I'm a very smart guy, I'm a very smart woman, I'm intelligent, I'm good at my job. This has nothing to do with that.
Right.
And that's the struggle I think people are going to have when they mean, what do you mean it has nothing to do with that? I've been journaling for years. I've been writing it down. I'm like, I'm glad you write it down. But you don't understand what you're looking at because of the mind's interpretation of your recreation of the trauma. There's a whole new thing. There is a paradigm in your body. And until, and I teach meditation. I've been doing meditation for a very long time, and it bothers me when people say, well, I've been meditating, because you have to be trained and taught to meditate by a person in a room, because you can get lost and go the wrong way with energy, right? So when we get into church and religion and spirituality, we're really talking about energy development. And the way that energy development is sinking into your crown, right? Because we're receivers and transmitters, right? If you are receiving through a filtered crown, you're not going to get the full energy of the spiritual life.
That's powerful. And people don't understand that, and it's hard. And I think about my own life, and I certainly am open to disclose as is appropriate. But as you said, that was so powerful to me. This is not about cognition or intellect.
Right.
This is not about how much you achieve. This is about emotionality and spirituality, the way in which the body and the mind is making sense. And so we can deceive ourselves into thinking and into believing that we're okay as a method of survival. Because the reason why we ward this off is because it's too scary.
It is scary. It's frightening.
It's too anxious producing. And that's why you need someone or people that have gone through the process or in the process to be with you as a person or people of accountability, but to have or to provide a space of safety so that you can in safety begin. Because the other piece of this that's scary for people is, and I tell students this all the time, if you're going to do good therapy, you have to be ready to help people replace their old way of being in thought with new ways of being in thought. It's not enough to open people up and to help them expose or to come to consciousness about things unless there is a healthy, powerful process to create a holding environment to replace those thoughts and those ways of being and those patterns of being that they are not replacing. It's scary to think about, okay, well, all right, I know I'm doing this because blah, blah, blah. Okay, I've admitted it, I've come to consciousness. Now, what new emotion, what new way of feeling do I replace with all of that I've been living with and living in all of these years?
Which is why I tell people, you got to ask the question. Now, here's the thing. You may not know the question. And that's okay. But because cultivating and development is different than evolving. We evolve in survival. We cultivate and develop from an intentional purpose of changing, right? When we cultivate something, you're actually not just planting a seed, but you're making sure how the seed grows. You're intentionally pruning that leaf or cutting that stem. You're creating. You are the creator, which is because it flows right into the religious studies. Be the creator within, right? Because you are the creator. And if you're not creating, then what you're doing is you've absorbed everything that the environment has dictated to you. And we know in certain environments, there's nothing but trauma.
Right. I like how you say that because I think that most people are just evolving. That evolving is just a consequence of just ecology. That we are all, our bodies are going to evolve. It's just a part of the process of living.
Right.
But that cultivation is very different. And I think that many of us are evolving, that we're just evolving via the rites of passage.
Yeah.
That we are constructed within our society. You talked about that earlier when you started. And we think that those things are making us better, or making us more eloquent in our living. But that cultivation demands a structured and a purposeful process of intentionality, intentional reflexivity.
Yeah, it demands your attention. Put it that way. And if you're not giving, we as parents or people will give attention to something, but we don't give attention to ourselves. And I ask people, how do you know you're breathing? And they normally say, I don't know. And I said, that's because you're not intentionally breathing. You just think it's an involuntary action, which really your heart is doing what it's doing, but you are not breathing. You are not breathing in your life. You're not expelling in your life. Because things are being used. You have to take in oxygen and nitrogen and expression to carbon, and that goes with the pH levels in our body. If our pH levels are too high, it goes all the way back to cell development, right? Because if you're not intentionally breathing, then how do you know you're oxygenating your cells and oxygenating your body? You don't know. I love what we're going to be doing here at Free at Last. We're going to unpack this very slowly because we're not going to steamroll over the information where it just goes right over your head and you're just like, oh no, it's too much. We don't want this to be too much. And I can tell you right now, it's going to be slow conversation because it's about you understanding, because we're sick of you binding yourself in a sickness that you can choose to get out.
And the other thing is, I'd like you to, those that are listening, please listen to what the doctor is saying. And I talk about this all the time, that we're in this society where everything is facts. Microwave economics, microwave relationships, everything is dramatic, everything is sexy, everything, is big. And that real change in reflexivity and unpacking, it takes time. It's not an overnight. And I think this is one of the critiques I have of religion, particularly as I was in ministry many years ago, around the laying on of hands, and around the prayer, and around the miracles. And to me, miracles do happen on an everyday basis, but a miracle is progressive in nature to me. It's not, we're looking for instantaneous change and shifting. And some things are so ingrained in our body and in our minds that it takes time and patience and empathy with ourselves to let that thing go, to let those things go, and to try things that sometimes may not even feel normal. And we may not get it right. We may have more questions, but that's the process of cultivating and becoming more intentionality and alive in one's life.
I think one of the tests I actually give people when you said try things is, can you think of something you've never done before? And I get what? Can you think of something you've never done before? The long pause, I said, that long pause is because you're so ingrained into what you're used to. And to change what you've been going through, you have to now start to learn how to develop the thinking things you've never thought of before.
That's right. That's right. That's scary.
That is.
I'm looking forward to it.
I want to take. We're going to make this a short thing today. We are busy, but we want to introduce ourselves. We wanted to say I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. This is Dr. O'Shane Gadsden.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And you can always reach us here. Put in the comments. We'll be answering comments. We'll be back here next Monday, free at last, breaking the bondage of the black male. So we know there's more work to do, and that's okay. We know you may miss the live shows. That's okay, but you'll see the recorded show. So we'll put it out there. We'll let you know, and God bless, man. Everyone, take it easy, be safe, and put in the work. Put in the work, brothers. Thank you so much, Dr. O'Shane. I will talk to you later offline. You get to work because you got more things to do before you hit the sack.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your flexibility. And the listening audience, I'm looking forward to being a part of this. And not just giving, but learning. Because I truly am listening and learning, even as we are in this process of collaboration.
Thank you so much, sir.